Hey guys, so it's been a while since I've done a wrap-up video and I wanted to do this really quick. I was feeling like I am at this point in the summer where I was just gonna wait until my kids go back to school to start filming videos again because it's been so hard to do stuff like this, but I feel like if I wait too much longer I'm gonna have too many books to do a wrap-up video with, so I'm just gonna do it now. Some of the books in this video are actually from my TBR for August, so books that were in my August TBR, but August is not quite over yet, and right now I'm reading this book that I was not intending to read, if I'm being honest. Like, it wasn't part of my TBR or anything, but I picked it up. I literally read the first page. I just wanted to see what the writing style was going to be like, and I was like, I'm just going to read the first page. I'm curious, you know, what this is going to be like. Started reading the first page, and literally, I'm not kidding, I was suddenly on page 50. I had no intention of reading this book in that moment, but it was so engaging that I just started reading this book without even planning on it. So I'm really liking this current book that I'm reading, and I was gonna wait to film this video until after I got done reading this book, but I'm not going to bother. But yes, I'm accidentally reading a book right now that was not on my TBR, but like, that's the point of reading, right? Like when you find a book that you're just so engrossed in that you don't even care about anything else and you just start reading it without even like planning on reading it, like that's the best feeling ever. So the very last book that I read in my last video was None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell, and the book that I read right after that was a book that I had put on so many TBRs. It was like the fourth time on my monthly TBR, and I was like, I have to read this book. And sure enough, I read it. And it was The Lost Ticket by Freya Sampson. And this book I was so excited to read. This was on my Books I Want to Read in 2023 video. And you know, when I was reading this book, I wasn't exactly sure what I was thinking about it. I wasn't sure what I was going to rate it. And I think for most of this book, I was kind of leaning towards a 3-star. Not because it wasn't like good or anything, it was really enjoyable, but it was just not like maybe quite 4 or 5 stars. But then the end came, and the end made this book 4 stars for me, and I like waffled back and forth, but the end was just really, really good. And if you like endearing stories, then you're really gonna like this, because I feel like the ending of this book was so flippin' endearing. And if you don't know what this book's about, it's basically about a girl who goes through a breakup and she ends up moving away to this new place, and she gets on this bus and she meets this old man. And the old man tells her that he met this woman on this exact same bus, literally like when he was 20, so years and years and years ago, and that woman changed his life, and ever since then he has been looking for her because he is desperate to find this woman that he met when he was like 20. And so the main character decides she wants to help him find this woman, and in this process they become friends, and there's a little romance in it, but it's so much more than the romance. There's like this whole other plot line that happens, and it's just a really sweet book. And the end was just so sweet, and you realize like so much about just relationships and life and all of that kind of thing when you read this book. Like, I feel like there's some really good life lessons in here where, you know, an old person telling you like maybe some of their regrets or some of their decisions that they made that they're really happy that they made in their life that, you know, really changed the direction that their life went for the better. It was 3 stars kind of throughout, but at the very end it pushed it up a star for me because it was just that cute. So highly recommend if you're looking for a book that just has like that really endearing, a little bit more hard-hitting, it has like the good life lessons, all that kind of thing. This is a great little book. I wouldn't say it's like purely for romance though. Like, if you're a romance person, this isn't a romance. Like, I kind of thought it was going to be a romance, and there is a romance in it, but it's definitely not written for the romance, I would say. So the next book that I read was Horrid, and this was on my July TBR, and this was one of those random reads that had been sitting on my shelf forever, and I finally decided to pick it up. And this book wasn't horrible. It was definitely like kind of a fun, kind of creepy, spooky read, and I would definitely recommend reading this maybe in the fall, because it does take place kind of in a colder climate. It takes place in the fall, and there's definitely fall vibes while you're reading this. But this is one of those books that was just a little bit meandering to me, and I feel like a majority of this book wasn't really about the horror. Like, there was some horror sprinkled in, but it was definitely more like about this girl's grief and her moving to this new town, and then her making friends, and then her relationship with her mom, and then her getting a job, and then her going to school, and then her doing this, and it was just kind of like meandering along on her journey in this new town with a little bit of a horror plot sprinkled in. And it definitely has that like haunted house thing going on where she moves to this haunted house and like weird things start happening. but it's just not really packed full of that haunted, creepy, spooky mystery stuff. I would say the ending is actually pretty interesting, but the ending didn't make up for what the rest of the book was. And so I ended up giving this 2 stars just because I was like, you know, I didn't feel like this book delivered kind of like what I was hoping for. And to be honest, I'm not surprised that I gave it 2 stars. I saw a lot of people rate this pretty low actually, and I was really sad that they rated it low because the cover is just so stunning, and I was hoping that there would be a part of me that would really, really like it, and I would be kind of an unpopular opinion, but I just wasn't an unpopular opinion. Like, this book just didn't really hit the marks, and it didn't deliver what like you think it's going to deliver. Does that make sense? Like, it's one of those books that I feel like it's marketed a certain way, but then it doesn't give you what it's marketing. That's kind of where I feel this book falls. So the next book that I read is Life's Too Short by Abby Jimenez, and as you guys know, I love Abby Jimenez. So I really, really ended up liking this book. This book is about a girl who is a YouTuber actually, which I really, really liked because I'm a YouTuber. I've been a YouTuber for a very, very long time, and so it kind of, I could relate to a lot of the things that she was experiencing. And she's a travel influencer, by the way, so she does a lot of traveling, and she really wants to like seize the moment and like do as much as she possibly can in her life. And the reason why is because she is terminally ill. So she has an illness that will probably kill her young, and she wants to do as much as she possibly can before she dies. And that's kind of how her YouTube channel started. Well, one day her drug addict sister drops off her baby at her doorstep, and she has to take care of this baby all by herself. And the neighbor is a guy, a single guy, he's a lawyer, and they meet, and he ends up like helping her with this baby, and through that they kind of like grow a bond and a friendship, and it's so cute. Like, if you love the friends to lovers trope, this is an amazing friends to lovers trope that I absolutely loved. And this is another one of those a little bit more hard-hitting romances that has like that really hard-hitting thing that kind of makes you think, kind of teaches you some lessons, and just kind of makes you think about life a little bit differently. And it was just a really, really, really overall good story. And you guys know how I feel about friends to lovers. I love a sweet love interest, like a guy that's very, very sweet and charming and all of those types of things. And that is definitely how the main character is in this, or the main love interest. There's definitely no hate to love in this, which hate to love is okay, but it's definitely not my all-time favorite. And this kind of character is my all-time favorite. Just sweet, charming, helpful, and wonderful. And I loved this. I thought it was fantastic, but that doesn't surprise me because I love Abby Jimenez. She never lets me down. So another book that I read was Blood Sugar, and this is by Sasha Rothschild. And I read this via audio while I was like cleaning my house and everything. And this book was an interesting read. But one thing that I can say about this book is it's a little bit forgettable. It's one of those books that you read and you're like really kind of into, and you're enjoying while you're reading it, but you just forget a lot of what happened in it after you're done reading it. That's kind of where this book fits. And this book is basically about this girl who is a sociopath, but is in complete denial that she's a sociopath. And what happens is when she's young, she kills this little boy when she's a little girl. And she does it because he's not a nice person, and she just needs to take care of it, because if this little boy is dead, then she can just move on with her life and she doesn't have to worry about him anymore because he's not nice. So she ends up murdering him, and then she just moves on with her life. You know, she does have a little bit of guilt, but she just doesn't really think too much about that time in her life. But then when she gets older, she kills someone else. And again, she's like, he deserved it. Like, what else was I supposed to do? So she just kind of moves on with her life. And it's this girl that just has killed people in her life, and she's been around a lot of deaths. She's kind of been present with a lot of deaths, or she doesn't like stop deaths that she sees that are going to happen. She doesn't try to intervene or anything like that. But she just kind of remains unattached from these things. Well, one day, her husband passes away. And she actually had nothing to do with this murder, but it kind of starts to come out that she was around when all these other murders happened, and she kind of becomes the key suspect. And so she's trying to prove that she didn't kill her husband, and it's basically this really interesting like kind of character study of somebody that might be a little sociopathic but just doesn't think that they are. But she definitely is, and it was just really, really interesting in that regard. I would say if you're kind of interested in psychology, you might really like this as well. But like I said, it was a little bit forgettable. Like, I liked the story while I was reading it, but afterwards, like, I can't recall all the details and all that kind of thing when I think about it. And I feel like that alone usually makes a book about a 3-star read for me is if I feel like it's forgettable and I can't remember a lot of details, or I kind of have to sit down and think, wait, what was this book about again? And usually it comes back to me, but like I have to think about it for a while. I'm like, oh my gosh, that book was so good. So I definitely recommend this book if you're kind of into psychology and you kind of like stuff like that and you like character studies. But I wouldn't say that this is like a super like thriller mystery type of thing. It's not suspenseful. It's just more of like a character study. So I gave it 3 stars. It wasn't the worst, but it also wasn't the best. It was just kind of so-so. It was in the middle. So the next book that I read was another audiobook, and it was called Dirty Liar. Now, I found this on Audible, and it was in the free book section, so it didn't cost like any of my credits or anything. And I just wanted like a short, quick book to read while I was cleaning, and this one was only like maybe 4.5 hours or something like that. So I was like, okay, that's the perfect length. So this is a great book if you just want something quick that you can maybe listen to for like 2 days. And this book actually surprised me. I gave this book 4 stars. So this is basically about a girl who is running through the forest and she falls into a hole. And she realizes that the hole was actually a trap. And she's trying to figure out if she knows the person that created this trap, if this person is trying to get revenge on her, or if she's just a victim of a crime. She's trying to figure it out, but she's stuck in this hole. And it's a really, really, really interesting story because there's a really, really interesting twist in this, and if you like books with twists, this is a great one. I definitely did not see the twist coming in this book at all. It definitely came out of, I wouldn't say it came out of left field, like it was a really good way that she wrote this book, and it was really creative, which I really like. Like, I don't think I've ever actually read a story that was kind of written in this way. And that's what I really, really liked about this. So I do recommend this if you kind of like mystery, if you kind of like thriller, if you kind of like suspense, and if you kind of like, survival. I would definitely say this has a little bit of a survival element to it. And it was really good. And like I said, it was only like 4.5 hours, so it was a really quick read. And when you have a book that's a little bit on the shorter side, I feel like they just move a lot faster, which I appreciate. You guys know my attention span isn't the best. And I would highly recommend this. I'm really surprised it was on the free book list on Audible, but it was totally worth the read. And if you're looking for something fast, this is definitely a good one. Highly recommend it. 4 stars. It was good. So the next book that I read was a book that I kind of thought I may not like, but then I knew that there was maybe a part of me that would really like it because it's by an author that I really like. So it's Tessa Bailey's Secretly Yours. Now this book was one of those weird books because I was like, okay, I've really liked Tessa Bailey books that a lot of people don't like. So maybe I'll like this one too, because I knew a lot of people didn't like this one as well. And I was like, well, I'll probably like it though, because it's Tessa Bailey. But I have to say, I did not like this at all. This was one of the most boring books I have read in a really long time. And I don't know if you guys have ever experienced this before, but you read an author that you usually love, and you read one of their books and you don't like it, right? And you're like, wow, this book is boring. And you start to notice things about their writing that you didn't notice before, and you're like, oh my gosh, is this gonna ruin their writing for me forever? Like, did this book ruin Tessa Bailey for me? I don't think it did. I think that this was just a fluke, but I did notice things about her writing where I'm like, oh my god, has all of her books been like this? Or is it just this one? Like, I couldn't tell. So I gave this book 2 stars. I was not happy with it. It's basically about this girl who's like a gardener, and she lives in like wine country, and there's this guy that she's obsessed with. She's been obsessed with him since like high school, and he didn't ever really give her a chance. But then she sees him one day and she's like, oh my god, it's that guy that I'm like literally obsessed with and stalking online. And she's like, I want to do garden work for him so I can get closer to him. So she kind of weasels her way into his life and does gardening work for him, and then they kind of like start getting to know each other, and that's about it. There was no interesting plot line to this at all. Like, I can't explain it any other way. Like, you know how a lot of romances have like really interesting elements, or like a really interesting meet cute, or like just some really off the wall thing that makes the plotline really interesting? This didn't have any of that. It was just some girl, and I guess there was like a secret admirer element, like she was leaving in secret admirer notes or whatever, and that kind of made it interesting every once in a while, but it was so minimal to the story that it just was so gosh darn boring I couldn't even handle it. Like, I was skimming it. And the thing that I noticed in this book, and I don't know if all of Tessa Bailey's books have been like this because I've always loved her books, but this one specifically that got on my nerves is she never wrote dialogue fluidly. And I realized that it's something that I absolutely hate. Like, if 2 characters are having a conversation, right, and talking with each other, just make them talk to each other. Literally, it can be line of dialogue, just back and forth, you know, going back and forth. Like, that's makes it interesting. You can get to the point, you can see what they're talking about. But what Tessa Bailey does, and what she did a lot in this book, was it was like one person would say something, and then there would be this whole paragraph of like describing their thoughts and how they felt and what they did with their hair. And then there'd be another line of dialogue. And then it would be another paragraph of like their thoughts and their feelings and what they did with their lint on their sweater and blah, blah, blah. And you're just like, just have the conversation. Like, I don't need to know every detail of their movement and their thoughts and their feelings during this conversation. Like, just have the conversation. And it was driving me crazy. I hate it. And she did it really, really bad in this book. So that's one of the things that I realized, like, oh my gosh, has Tessa Bailey always done this and I just never noticed it? Maybe the plot lines were more interesting, I don't know. But it's gonna be really interesting reading more Tessa Bailey in the future to kind of see if this is something that she's always done. Yeah, I gave this book 2 stars. I just was so insanely bored and I didn't like it. And yeah, I'm gonna be getting rid of this book for sure. The next book that I read was The Dark King, and this is by Gina L. Maxwell. Now, I got this book in my bookish box. It was the adult fantasy bookish box. And I had not heard of this book until I went on Goodreads and I saw the cover that they have on Goodreads, and I was like, oh, I've seen that book around. And so I decided to read it because it's a really, really short, like, fantasy romance. And I'm like, okay, so this book is dark. It's a dark romance. And one thing that I've come to realize is I'm not a dark romance girly. Like, I can read them and it's fine, but it's simply not my favorite type of romance. And this is like 50 Shades of Grey, if you know what I mean. Like, there's definitely like BDSM type of stuff in here, but it's like Beauty and the Beast plotline, but with fae. That's the best way to describe this book. And I just don't know how much I love the dark romance, 50 Shades of Grey. Like, I read 50 Shades of Grey back in the day, and like, I just don't like that kind of romance. I'm sorry, it's just not my cup of tea. I gave this book 4 stars, but I ended up lowering it down to a 3. Because I did give it a 4 because I really liked how just fast-paced this was. It was to the point. There wasn't a ton of world building. Like, sometimes I don't like world building with my fantasies, and this didn't have it, and it didn't need it, if I'm being honest. Like, this is not one of those books that need world building. So I really liked it in that regard, but upon thinking about it, there's just romances and fae romances and stuff like that that I just think I would like more. There's plot lines that I would like more, and this was just a 3. It wasn't the worst, it wasn't the best, but I definitely think this book is more so about what you like and what you enjoy in your fantasy romances versus whether or not it was good, if that makes sense. This is definitely in the category of good trash. I have it in my good trash folder on Goodreads or shelf or whatever it's called, because that's kind of what it is. I may read the next ones. I'm just kind of curious because I did kind of like the characters. Like, there's like brothers. It kind of has a Court of Thorns and Roses vibes, you know, like a tight-knit circle and stuff. So I may read the other books. They're all standalones, but I think they're like the same characters, if that makes sense. But I wouldn't say this is like my all-time favorite romantasy, but it was fun. Next book that I read, but DNF'd, was Remarkably Bright Creatures. Now, this is probably a surprise to you guys because I thought for sure. I think I picked this book on my TBR as a 5-star prediction. Now, here's the thing though. I think I will like this book, truly. Like, I think this could still be a really high book on like my rating system. It could be a 4-star even still. But I was in a reading slump at the beginning of this month, and this book is not the book you want to read during a reading slump because the beginning is so slow. And I feel like I would really like this book on audio. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this back to my sister-in-law, and I'm going to listen to this book on audio because I do think I can like it, and I think I will like it because I do love octopuses and stuff. But the beginning of this book was just too slow for me. And if you've read this book, you know exactly what I mean. Like, I think I was like almost 30% of the way in, and it was still like introducing characters and kind of just meandering along, not really giving me any plot line whatsoever. And I'm like, I can't do this right now. Like, I need something that's a bit more interesting. You know what I mean? And then I went into Secretly Yours by Tessa Bailey, and it was just as bad. So I didn't go into something that was better, but this just wasn't the book for me at the right time. It just didn't come into my life at the right time. But I do, like I said, still want to read this just on audio. So I think I'm going to do that. The next book was also from my August TBR video, and it was Come Closer by Sarah Gran. Now, this book was one of those really, really weird books. And a book that is very similar is Haruki Murakami's After Dark. And the way that they're similar is I felt the same way about that book as I did with this book. So with After Dark by Haruki Murakami, I remember loving the reading process of that book, and I remember getting done with that book. I couldn't put that book down, and people would ask me like, what did you think about that book? And I was like, I loved it, but I literally cannot tell you why. And I don't know if you've ever felt like that with a book before, where you're like, why did I like this? I don't know why I liked it. Like, I don't know what it was about this book that I liked. It's not like there was some epic twist or anything. It's not like anything crazy happened, but like I loved it, and I just don't know why. That is how I felt with this book. So I gave this book 5 stars, and I had that same like reading process where I was so invested in this, and I think it's because there were short chapters, which short chapters are amazing for people with short attention spans, and this had short chapters, but like I was so invested in this girl's story. And basically it's about this woman who is basically just living her life, and just really weird things start happening to her, and she starts making really bad decisions, and she doesn't know what's wrong with her, but then she starts to think that she might be possessed, but she can't tell anybody this because she just sounds crazy. But like her relationship starts to like blow up in flames, and things just start going really, really crazy, and it's just a really, really, really interesting book. The way that the author wrote it was really, really interesting. Like, I feel like this could be done poorly, but this author just knew how to do it well to keep you like really invested in it. And I can't explain why, but I gave it 5 stars. I just thought it was super, super good and really, really interesting, and I just wanted to keep reading it and keep reading it and keep reading it. Don't know why. I wish I could be more specific, but I can't. So, Come Closer by Sarah Grant. It's a really, really short book. It's like a novella, but I really liked it. And that's really all I gotta say about it. So that is all for this reading wrap-up video. Like I said, I have a really, really amazing book that I'm reading right now that I cannot wait to talk about. And I think that is all, you guys. I only had 1 5-star read in this reading wrap-up, but I did have a lot of 4-star reads, I feel like. A lot of 3-star reads, which is really, really interesting. But I still read a lot of books that I highly recommend. And I'd be curious to know, is there any books in this video that you plan on reading just from my description? I'd be very curious to hear like your guys' thoughts on any of these books. So in the comments below, don't hesitate to comment. I love reading your guys' comments, and I try to get back to all of them just so I read all of your guys' comments. Always. I always read all your guys' comments, unless you comment on like a really, really old video. Sometimes I don't see it, but like I definitely see all your comments on new videos. So definitely comment whatever you want. And I think that's it, guys. So I will see you in my next video, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I will talk to you guys soon.